What's up, ladies and gentlemen, Neon Pow here, and this week we're doing part 11 to What If Naruto Was Raised by the Akatsuki. That means you have not seen the movie. I highly recommend you go watch that, as that encompasses everything up to Naruto Shippuden and will get you ready for this episode. So that is linked in the description and in the card above, so make sure to check that out. Before we get started, let's go ahead and give special thanks to Sassyeggroll, who has helped write the episodes we have been witnessing, including this one, so special shout out to him. And also special shout out to Hujayfa and Bennett for helping create the artistic content we are viewing. Also, thank you for all the new peeps that have joined the Pow Fam community. Welcome, and I hope you enjoy the content we are seeing. For the support of this video, let's try to do 300 likes. Even though I've been gone, I know you guys can hit that and keep that support staying strong. Now guys, let's go ahead and hop right into the video. Beginning in the second half of our story, we now jump into a time skip of about a year and a few months. We start at the Akatsuki hideout. Obito is attempting to convince Nagato to put the final pieces of their plan into motion. They now have the manpower to capture the remaining bijou, which would push them closer to being able to start the war that would shift the entire world. For some reason though, Nagato was hesitant. It would seem that something else was weighing on his mind. Perhaps it was his thoughts of Naruto, seeing as he had practically raised the boy. Was he by chance concerned, seeing as Naruto would be the target to his plan? To ease Nagato's concern, Obito quickly reminded him that he had drained some of the Nine-Tails chakra from Naruto with use of the Preta path in the boy's youth, so as to not have their loss of the boy be an hindrance in a situation similar to this one. Nagato impatiently said he knew, and calmed himself before continuing, saying he had other things on his mind, but thanked Obito for his concern anyways. Seeing Nagato in such an uneasy state was, to say the least, of his problems. Unfortunately for Obito, he didn't have an easy way to reacquire the Rinnegan should things go awry, as he had lost his Mangekyo at the hands of Itachi a few years back. He's been having to tread very lightly around the Akatsuki, especially Nagato, due to the fact that he can't afford to be as careless anymore. Fortunately, he has a reserve of several Sharingan left, but that will give him at most a single chance to escape the grasps of death using Izanagi if things come down to the worst. He hadn't realized until now how heavily he relied on Kamui, but these things were now his reality. Obito suggested that Nagato order several of the Akatsuki to capture the remaining tailed beast, and while hesitating to respond at first, Nagato eventually said he'd give the order, saying that the plan to make the world anew would be set into motion soon after. Obito's good mood quickly declines as Zetsu returned once again with no news about the whereabouts of Naruto, let alone the location of his eye. Furthermore, he could tell Zetsu showed less interest in his search, as he showed to be less and less cooperative with these searches, coming back sooner each time, his reports growing more and more brief. Obito would simply have to use the capture of the tailed beast as an opportunity to collect his eye as well. Later that day, the order was given out for each of the Akatsuki pairs to capture the Jinchuriki assigned to them. Tobi and Zetsu were to take on the Three Tails, which had recently fallen under new ownership. Because of this transfer had occurred rather recently, it should be an easy task considering its Jinchuriki wouldn't be able to utilize its powers anywhere near its full capacity. As the Akatsuki head out in search of their respective tailed beasts, our sights now shift to Konoha, specifically Danzo's lab. Danzo, as Hokage for the last 3 years, has been focusing on more important matters than keeping the village prosperous. He has put all his efforts into his secret project of keeping Kimimaro alive. By the time he realized what a daunting task this was, he'd already poured too much time and resources into him to simply stop. When normal healthcare and medical ninjutsu failed to heal him, Danzo decided to take more experimental measures. With the use of Hashirama's cells, they were able to stabilize Kimimaro's condition, but nothing much seemed to change. The illness wouldn't progress, but it was still present. Danzo decided to do some research on Kimimaro's familial history. Upon doing so, he found out that the subject's clan had a big conflict with a village hidden in the mist about a decade ago. So Danzo tried diplomacy, explaining the situation to the new Mizukage why he was in need of the files regarding the Kaguya clan. Upon being told no such thing existed, he of course resorted to more criminal means, employing a former spy of his, Kabuto. Strangely enough, he seemed to be accompanied by a peculiar girl, but that mattered not. Upon being told the situation, Kabuto named his price. It was paid for by the Leaf villagers' tax money, and the job was done. They returned complaining about the same ice user they encountered while sneaking into the place where the files were held. Knowing exactly what their complaints meant, Danzo silenced them with nearly double the cash originally agreed upon. A generous offer, but he was in a generous mood. Giving the files to his head scientist, he waited for results. In a few months' time, they were delivered. Sometime within the week, Kimimaro was supposedly going to awaken. What couldn't be predicted, however, was the problems awaiting once he did. Once Kimimaro awakened, he went on a rampage, causing 2 casualties and 6 wounded, 3 of which were hospitalized, and most of them were at least Jonin status. In response to this chaos, Danzo had to suppress the boy himself with his wood release. He then ordered everyone to rush out, and he began removing the wrappings from his face to reveal the eye of Shishui. Using Kotoa Mutsukami on Kimimaro, Danzo began grinning to himself as he released him from the wood that was binding him. Kimimaro looked around, confused, no longer knowing where he was. All he could remember was his name and a vague sense of who he was. He tried thinking of his past, anything about himself, but it was all a blank. He looked at Danzo, hoping he would have some answers. Danzo stood there, just smirking at Kimimaro. Instead of simply having Kimimaro as a loyal servant, unquestioning and reliable as any tool should be, with the use of Shishui's genjutsu, he decided he'd have a little fun with this after all his troubles. After humiliating his men like that, Danzo figured some form of punishment was in order. But what can you take from a man who has nothing? The Hokage deemed the answer to be his memory. He explained everything he'd just done to Kimimaro. The young man remained still as the light slowly drained from his eyes, listening to every word tightly. Danzo promised he'd return Kimimaro's memories if he followed his every command. However, if he refused, he'd simply wipe this conversation from his memory and leave him there alone. While he couldn't actually do this due to his visual prowess being under cooldown, that was unimportant due to Kimimaro not knowing this information. Kimimaro sat there in silence. He never wanted to feel as lost as he just was ever again. Being left alone in this unfamiliar place with not even his memories to accompany him felt like torture. But how much more pain would he have to go through to regain his past from this monster? He pondered this, breaking the deafening silence at last with a single utterance. Fine, I'll do it. Sometime later in the village hidden in the mist, Haku was awaiting to be notified that the transfer ceremony was ready to begin. From the day onward, he would be the Jinchuriki of the Three Tails. This was to reward him for his contribution in the recent coup against the Mist's former leadership, as if that be considered a reward. The last Jinchuriki was the 4th Mizukage, Yagura Karatachi. He was the reason why the village was known for the decades as the Bloody Mist. The reputation that would come with this was sure to be a poor one, to say the least. He didn't care though. He simply do what needed to be done to ensure that the Hidden Mist Village would one day lose its former reputation and become a place future generations wish to protect. It's what Zabuza would have wanted. After an excessive amount of time had passed, Haku decided to check on the progress of his preparations. As he neared the room, the sounds from it became increasingly more familiar to him. They were those of conflict, battle, war. His pace increased as he was now running towards the room, wondering what horrors would await him when he went inside. As he opened the door, he caught a glimpse of the men inside as they escaped, all the others now lying on the floor, injured in some way or another. He noticed black cloaks with red clouds, Obito and Zetsu, and with them was Yagura, the current Jinchuriki. Haku attempted to stop them, but he lost sight of them both as they turned the corner. Fortunately, as a former tracker ninja, he had the experience to stop them. He was even able to catch a glimpse of them, so at the very least, he knew who to look for. The Three Tails was a massive asset for the Hidden Mist, one they couldn't afford to lose at such an unstable time. He went over to one of the few shinobi currently conscious, briefly explained the situation, then went out to search of Yagura, and as an extension, the men who took him. Obito, who was quite a ways away from the Akatsuki's hideout at this time, decided to instead make it a priority to acquire his own eye as opposed to returning immediately. He thought they had gotten far enough away from the Mist Village and could tell Zetsu to handle the rest, returning to the Jinchuriki to the hideout, being foolishly unaware of the angry Haku rushing towards them. On another front, it has now been over a week since Kimimaru's memories were stolen. There's nothing here he feels any form of connection to. he wanders around doing the training Danzo requires of him, eating, sleeping, then doing it all again the next day. Everyone here seems to be stuck in that cycle, all living under the control of a demon who took his past, but they all seem more like puppets than people, long since broken by the cruel training they've been subjected to. Finally, some new news breaks this agony. Danzo told him he could now start repaying his debt. After having a seal placed under his tongue as an extra precaution, he called it, he was briefed on his mission, capturing a boy by the name of Naruto, last name supposedly unknown, and either killing or capturing the eyes of the two people he assumed were of the same clan, Sasuke and Itachi Uchiha. Once the mission was successfully completed, he could have his memories back. However, Kimimaro had a dreadful feeling about this mission. He felt that in his current state, he would not only be unable to capture the ninja, but that he wasn't supposed to hunt them down either. Danzo gave him a task he would surely be unable to complete in order to be able to use him more, while he held the hope he'd one day be able to regain his memories. He was disgusted that this plan was working. Even with that in mind, Kimimaro headed out to the area where the three were last seen, a small village at the edge of the land of water. On the shore, a great sea near the small village is where Naruto, Sasuke, and Itachi are currently staying. Naruto is woken up for breakfast by Itachi, which of course is fish again. That's all they've been able to eat as they've been on the run. Their wanted posters have apparently spread far past the borders of the land of fire, and are now even found around small fishing towns such as this one. Danzo's persistence knows no bounds. He must surely be the one behind this act. As Naruto complains about this predicament, all Itachi can do is apologize. On the other hand, Sasuke is sitting in a tree overlooking the bay and its surroundings. It's currently his turn to be on the lookout. Sasuke's perception has gotten so refined that from the scent of the air alone, he could tell that something bad was approaching them quickly. He called out to the other two to warn them, and in just a matter of moments, Obito made a surprise entrance in hopes of acquiring his Mangekyo. Naruto and Sasuke were ready to fight the tyrant, but despite being more than strong enough to handle the situation, Itachi, with a stern and serious voice, ordered them to escape instead. They weren't sure why, but they weren't going to fight him on this. In a nearby distance, Haku, who had already tracked down Zetsu and apprehended him on the water, was on the search for the masked man after dropping off the captured Jinchuriki to his village. Aiding him in his search were several missed Anbu. The group searched the area for several minutes, and as Haku was about to reach the bay's shore, he heard the shouting of one of his men from within the forest. Turning that way instead, he and several others arrived on the scene to see a member of their own on the ground, though mostly uninjured. Ordering the squadron to spread out once more, Haku stayed behind to question what exactly had happened to the soldier. As the Anbu lifted himself off the ground, he simply told Haku that the silence attacked before he could see them, but he assumed there were two of them judging from the number of footsteps he heard while he was still on the ground. Haku told the soldier to regroup with the others, and that he would meet up with them shortly. Within the next few seconds, Naruto and Sasuke decided to attack Haku from both ends and used both of their signature attacks. Haku skillfully moving out of the way fast enough for the two to redirect their attacks away from each other. From their techniques and ability to conceal their presence to such a high degree, Haku knew this wouldn't be a simple fight. However, even with the rapid pace of the clashes, all three of them seemed to realize at the same time that this wasn't the first time they'd met. All three of them had changed physically, quite significantly over the years, but they couldn't help but feel a familiarity in each other's aura. Everyone was hesitant to make the first move, but Haku decided to be the first by removing his mask. Naruto and Sasuke were relieved to see it was their old friend and began lowering their battle stance to reintroduce themselves. Haku then began asking what they were doing there and why they attacked one of his men. They didn't have time to explain this to him in full, but Naruto quickly explains that due to the circumstances, it's safer to assume everyone is after them at the moment than not. Haku then decided to give the duo his side of the story and said he was actually chasing after someone else who had infiltrated the Mrs. Prison and escaped with a person very important to the village's plans. Sasuke cuts Naruto off as he was about to inquire more, asking if this man was wearing a mask revealing one eye. As Haku said yes, Sasuke redirected their attention toward the area he and Naruto had just come from. He then darted off into that direction. Naruto explained as they ran after him that the man that Haku was looking for was currently attacking Sasuke's brother, and that he could take his head when they killed him. As they arrived at the bay, they were greeted by the sight of a wooden dome being burned by black flames. Itachi was clutching his hand over his eye, blood running down it, but the flames still continued to burn. He's wasted much of his chakra reserves, too much it seemed. Based on the situation, it looked to be that Itachi pushed Obito into a corner, and that the menace used the dome as a last resort, the Amaterasu being Itachi's response. A massive downpour begins to form, and with thunder in the distance, Sasuke steps forward, telling Naruto to tend to Itachi while he takes care of the situation. Naruto does this, helping Itachi to his feet, demanding he stop the black blaze. Continuing it any longer could prove fatal. Itachi simply smirks at Naruto, telling him he knew his limits, and that he'd stop after Sasuke cracks through the wooden barrier. Sasuke raises his hand to manipulate the skies themselves with the use of Kirin, the massive lightning dragon being dropped into the dome in the blink of an eye. As Amaterasu spreads to what was inside of the now demolished dome, it's apparent very quickly that there was no one inside. Then, in a blink of an eye, several wooden spikes jut out of the ground, the majority of which impale Itachi, while several others shallowly pierce Naruto as well. A great ball of flame separates Sasuke and Haku from the two, and within another second, Itachi's gone. Zetsu, who Haku thought he eliminated, aided in Obito's swift escape with Itachi. Zetsu even got Obito out of the dome without Itachi noticing to be able to get the drop on him. Everyone who was standing on the sand has no idea what just happened, other than the fact that Itachi was simply no longer there. Sasuke immediately collapses with grief. Naruto is immediately pounding the ground in front of him as tears fall freely before collapsing himself. His wounds were more severe than what one should think from simply looking at them. Though the wounds were shallow, there were many cuts that spread across a large area of his body. As Haku shot a flare into the air to alert the Anbu that the silence had gone away, Naruto had just enough time to note the irony of the Black Ops using such a non-discreet form of long-range communication before blacking out. And that's ending this part. Now guys, like always, make sure to comment your opinions below and leave a like if you enjoyed this video. But until the next video guys, much love, Neon out.